Alright, so I got two papers here, and one is the schematic of how it all works every step of the way, and the other one is another brief overview, but has notes too. And so first let's go through this. So the user could enter by either voice or text on the keyboard shelves in room, and these two are objects, and they select the shelf object, and the room selects the room object from an object base. Then the in word is an action word, the verb, and it selects either a picture or a video from the guide base, and it can also select actions from the action base of how it will move these objects around, if it will scale them or change their color or move them or rotate them. And so then it moves them around and tweaks them, and it checks if it matches closer. And then if so, it will tweak its bounds so that, like you might have a bowl and a hammer, and the hammer moves over here, it's like, oh, it's closer, and it moves over here, and then so the boundary of where it can move tightens until it gets in there. But you can also use the data from the game engine. Maybe you could just teleport it at the actual coordinates of where the other object is, but there's other things that just can't do that, maybe, or at least easily, like changing the vertices and morphing it and the color. So then it will keep checking that it's playing with the objects, and it's, instead of it being a marble in a glass, it might be shelves in a room. So that's how that works there. So you can keep going on that. Now you got shelves in a room. You can say toilets lining shelves, and then what that does is it grabs the object toilet, shelves grab the shelves, and now it wants to grabs the objects that you enter and selects them, and then it will this word will get actions from the action base, and from the guide base it'll get a picture, video, or data, and then it will move them around, gets the objects, moves them around, checks if it looks like this, and so now instead of apples or fruit on a piece of wood there, it will be like toilets on a shelf. And now when you check if the toilets are on the shelf, you want the room hidden, maybe, so you're just dealing with those two objects, and so you hide the rest. And so you can keep going, and then so this is more notes now, and so basically you have to now understand that when the user enters text, like a red ball with spikes enters room, you want to keep it as an object the user enters, like ball enters room, and then the user enters the object, subject. It's a subject, but it's an object. And then they can also enter the verb enters, like the user could enter like ball grows, and the generator would make a ball that's growing as a video. It would output that. So subject, verb, object, and like I'm saying here, you can do subject and verb, or you can do subject, verb, object. You don't have to fill in this space. So you can say, red, you can say ball enters room if you want. But so you got three there you can do. Subject, verb, object, if you want to do all three. Now if you look at this one, say you want to describe the object, like a red ball with spikes, A or few or extra or 7 can define how many of it. Everything can define selecting everything, and the or that can select the one closest, or can select the one instead of adding a new one to the scene. It can, if you say she eats the food or the pineapple, you can select the one that's already there instead of adding one. So, and then red ball with spikes, it will look at the ball object, it will look at the object base, and it will see which one has ball, red, and spikes, like tags. They're modifiers. And so then it will look through the object base and say, this object has the tags ball, red, and spikes. So it picks that one, and then it will do its thing there. It enters room, as I explained how that works on the other side of the page. Now, if it doesn't have a red ball spikes, it will have to create it. Then what it does, it says, oh, let's forget about that right now, and it looks at just this. Say it has a red ball but no spikes, it will have to create one with spikes. So spikes becomes the verb, the action word, and it also becomes the action word. Will define possibly which actions to do, if it should scale or location or rotation or color, and it will also pick from the guide base, say, a picture of spikes, and then it will be the verb, and then you got the object, and then it might morph the ball to make it grow spikes, and so that's what it will do. And then once that's done, it will continue on, and with this being the verb and object. And so that's how that works. So that was important there to understand. Now, moving over here, to better understand it, here's the creativity generator. So the user enters voice or text, and that's the input. So here again, you see that you can enter words, comma, you can enter words, comma, enter words, the subject, verb, and object. And of course, as I said, it can first be subject, verb here before it continues with the rest if it has to create one, if it's not in the memory base. So then what happens, as I said, is if you want a red ball or a round table, both of those keyword tags will both come down, and it will select the one with both tags, that object, the red ball, not the ball but the red ball. Now, as I said, if there's one that it doesn't know what that tag is, there's no red ball, there's only a ball, then the red will become the verb. So it will get the object, users selecting the object, one may be a ball, a table, a glass, a wine, and then the verb, the object over here is again another object, like, ball enters room. So objects, users selecting objects, then the verb, the action word, is going to, remember you got the objects the user selected, now the verb, like ball growing, so it's confusing. So the verb now will select from the guide base, this is the object base, the verb will select a picture or video, and it will also select actions to do with the objects, like location or rotation or scale or color, and the verb selects a picture or video, which will be a guide. Now, and the objects that we use don't have to be 3Dized from the real world, like having a camera go around. If you're not going to predict what it looks like on the other side of the phone, you could have a camera go around every object and 3Dize it into game engine. You could 3Dize everything in the real world, but we don't have to do that. It's easier just to, like, for example, go to UE4's asset store and download a whole bunch of 3D object meshes, and you know, like a lamp, a needle, a barn, ragdolls, and and same for the pictures and videos. You can get them from Google Images, YouTube, or the game engine's own ones. So now, as I'm saying here, the user selects objects, and the user is also selecting the guide, like ball in room. The end's going to select maybe a picture of a marble in a glass, because that's what you're basically doing, is you're putting the ball in the room, or shelves in a room. So it's going to select a picture of a ball, a marble in a glass maybe, or a hot dog in a pot. So then what happens is that you got the object selected, the guide selected. Some actions just might be selected automatically. Like, let's say it's better to always have that rotation skill being done to the objects, playing around with them. So then what happens is that the user selects that, and it comes down here, and in the 3D space it will have the objects, the user selected, and the actions to do with them, like maybe scale, location, rotation, color. And so it has the objects, lights, camera, ragdoll, move the little piece of the ragdoll. And so now what happens is that, as I said, you got the objects, you got the actions to do with them, and you got the guide over here. The guide is going to guide, you know, like if it's going to end up scaling it and putting it over here, like, you know, you're putting toilets on the shelf, so it's guiding it, like, you know, cans lined up in the store on shelves, so it's guiding it. It's similar, but it's new, so that's how it works. You're creating something similar but new, and so it will compare it, and that's the guide. Now, it doesn't have to be a neural network recognizing all the different types of parameters of, like, scale and location with segmentations for each object. It can be the game engine's own data. So if an object's over here, it can just use the coordinates. And so if you have 3 balls and you have 3 objects that are going to be the guide, and you got 3, like, pineapples, but you're using a guide of 3 marbles, it can just put all the pineapples to the actual locations, and just so they basically take place of their locations over here, and just so it's kind of like, you know, like you're having a ragdoll do a dance, and you're switching the ragdoll with another ragdoll, like, you know, so it's a different character but doing the same dance. So you're switching it using the data, instead of having it, like, you know, move there and tweak and get better until it's just right. You can just have it go right to the switch the data with the object. So you can do either way there. So basically what will happen, though, back to the way with the neural networks, is that it will got the objects, it will say it's moving their location or scale or whatever, and then once it does that with them, it keeps iterating that. So after it does that one time, they're all random parameters at first. Like, you know, they can be random scale, location, puts all the stuff you selected in there in the 3D space. Now, so once it first moves them and scales them very randomly at first, it's the first time it will now check if it's getting closer to the guide that the user selected. So what it will do is it will, say you have a whole bunch of objects, and you have a whole bunch of objects in the guide image or video, if there's 8, this object might be dedicated to this one. And this one might be this one, and this one might be this one, and this one might be this one. So if this one moves over here, then it's going to be checking if this one, if it moves over here, if it's closer to that one right there. If it moves over here, and it's farther away from that one. So each object, you know, like they have they're dedicated to one of these. So this one is going to be checking if this one's going to be checking if, you know, one of these moves over here, it's moving closer to where this one is on the image. Almost like you put 2 over top and you're moving it, is it closer to that one it's dedicated to? So then you'd move it over there, and the object's dedicated to that object. And so say you're checking now if it moved closer and it's in the same spot. So the neural network would have to recognize for those dedicated objects a segmentation essentially of that, only of that object for that object, of the location if it's getting closer, the scale, color, rotation, and so on, right? And so all those different types, and that's the trickiest part of this. So that's why, like, another option is to use the data of the game engine. So then after a certain amount of percentage of how much it matches, or a certain iteration count, you can have it pass out. And what you're passing out is the camera's taking the image, and so that's what's going on here. It's comparing it, like I said. The neural network's looking at the image from the camera right here. So now the whole 3D scene and the picture passes out of here, if it passes now, and it outputs, and it also goes up to here. The 3D scene will go up to here. You can save the whole 3D scene or objects and reuse them again. And the picture from the camera saved can go up here as a guide for further into it. Be used again. And then it's basically all to understand. So yeah. Another thing with the tweak bounds is, like, it might be like you got an object, and the guide image, the object you want to go over to is right here. So the object can move in a field this big, say. It can go over here, or it might randomly go here at first. If it gets closer to over here, to the one in the guide image, this thing, if it gets closer, then the tweak bound will close in like this. So that's why I drew it like this. It will go into the object like this. So the tweak bound of the circle, this side will stay where it is, but it will shrink down. You know what I mean? So now that would be for like location, but rotation would be tricky, like not if you use the game engine's data, but the scale would be basically the same idea, and color, different way to do that, and each one has a different way. So yeah. So yeah, basically, like, the user can enter whatever they want to create, or if they want to demonstrate something to somebody in a virtual reality, or they want to find a fix for something in their daily life. That's where the creativity generator comes in handy and has lots of uses. So I think that's all. So yeah.